Welcome to my Switching, Routing, and Wireless Essentials course. This should be the CCNA version 7 curriculum. This is the second of 3 courses. Module 10, LAN security concepts. So we're going to be looking at endpoint security, access security, layer 2 security threats, MAC address, and LAN-based attacks. So let's go and jump right on in. Endpoint security, that's going to be things that are attacking the endpoint. And again, because the growth of the internet, those endpoints, that connectivity has actually driven network traffic through the roof. Endpoints could be a computer, could be a phone, could be anything. Well, all of them are susceptible to common types of attacks. These attacks are things like denial of service attack or a data breach. That's where organizations lose their data, or even malware/viruses. Malware can actually do some serious damage. Malware costs, economies billions of dollars a year. So these types of attacks are growing because of, the interconnectivity of all of our end devices. The fact that almost everything now is connected to a network in some form or fashion only actually pushes these types of attacks to grow. So some of our security appliances, things like network access control or AAA servers or Cisco's ICE servers or next generation firewalls and VPNs, all of these things are hardware type devices or systems that are allowing us to be providing protection for that network at the perimeter. But the issue is the perimeter is changing because of cloud-based devices, because of those connectivity in devices. So we have some issues with our traditional protection mechanisms and how they are actually governing the protection of network-based resources. At the end of the day, all of these network devices are about being able to secure the endpoints. And we secure the endpoints through a combination. So that's the thing is, when we talk like onion level protection, we don't have a single layer. We have multiple layers. Here we see things like a VP-enabled router. We see a next generation firewall. We see NAC with AAA and ICE. We see an ESA/WSA, that's email security appliance and web security appliance. We see wireless LAN controllers. We see antiviruses. We may even see a HIP or NIP. HIP is Network Intrusion Prevention System. Our NIPs are network versus host-based. So HIP is host-based, NIP is network-based. We also have IDSs, both network-based and host-based as well. And again, all of these provide the additional layers of protection that our endpoints are going to be needing. And again, endpoints can be a tablet, phone, could be a cellular, a laptop, a computer, a printer, it could be a smart thermostat, a projector, and so much more. So in this chapter, we're looking at some of those security appliances. Here we're going to be looking at an email security appliance. And the nice thing here is when we are looking at email protection, Cisco has their ESAs. It does block known threat attacks. It does provide a certain level of remediation against stealthy malware. Basically, it scans emails as they come in, and if they're suspicious, they can quarantine them. They can disable links in emails. They can block access to certain websites if they are shown to be vulnerable. And the nice thing is, you can also set them to do auto encryption, both sending and receiving. Nice thing with that is, with almost any major cloud-based email system like Gmail or Office 365, Cisco ESA, the auto encryption, if certain things are found in an email, are commonplace now. So moving on, we have our web security appliance. That allows us to do filtering, looking at web content, looking at URLs, looking at URL content, looking at web pages, looking at file downloads, file categorization. Well, the nice thing is we all do that through our web security appliances. If you're looking at any big business or education institution, there's normally a security appliance there filtering mail or filtering web content, not just email. The nice thing is with our WSAs, it builds into the Cisco product line, so it just integrates a little bit easier. However, this is just one tool that works. There's multiple out there. One nice thing that I did like with the Cisco WSA is it does provide the endpoint protection, the advanced malware protection, the visibility of application and content, and it allows you to tie in certain policies and reporting features into the content as well. So that was all kind of a huge benefit. Moving on is our access control. We've already looked at setting up and generating things with local passwords in previous videos. Here we actually see the SSH functionality. I'm just going to grab my pen. This is plain text. This is SSH. You can see the generation of the RSA key, and we can see the generation of only allowing SSH as a valid input. Keep in mind, this is still login locally. We're not doing a AAA server just yet, but this is an example of how to do logins locally. There are some limitations. For example, the login device is on that local that login content is on that local device. The issue with that is if you got 20 devices, you have to now configure those 20 devices to use that local login. And there isn't really a fallback method if there's an issue. And I have run into this where I set a login local, it was compromised, and I lost access to that device. I had to manually reset it and rebuild it from a backup config. So not having a fallback definitely is a hindrance. That's where our AAA comes into play. This is authentication, authorization, and accounting provides the pillar or the framework of basic access control. That means understanding who is allowed access, authentication, what are they allowed to do, authorization, and what are they doing, accounting. Those are the three main pillars of our access controls. Again, authentication, we could do either local or server-based authentication. If we're doing server-based authentication, it will be things like Radius or TACACS. The nice thing is, both Radius and TACACS do communicate with AAA servers. They provide that communication channel. Almost all Cisco routers and switches that are current do provide some form of server-based AAA, and that functionality is just there. All of them do support local AAA, like a Cisco router or Cisco switch, so kind of just depends on what you're trying to accomplish. However, realistically, server-based is going to be the optimal, with a local being a fallback just in case. Authorization is automatically figuring out what you're allowed to do, so that once you're authenticated, you can be given the rights that you need to do whatever you need to do. Authorization governs what the users can and cannot do after they've been authenticated. Authorization uses a set of attributes that describe the user's access to the network, and these basically are the privileges and restrictions for that user. Accounting, in a nutshell, is it documents everything you do. It ties every single action you do back to your login. That's why those logins should be unique and to the individual, not so much a general admin account, but each admin having their own separate account. That way, you can log back and track back everything that was done back to an individual. 802.1x is one of the primary security standards for port-based access control and authentication. Basically, you want to provide any level of protection on a port or wireless connection, you're using the 802.1x standard. 802.1x has three main components: supplicant, authenticator, and authentication server. Supplicant is basically who's requesting access. The authenticator is going to be the device that controls access, and then it will forward our requests to our authentication. A computer comes online from a physical port. That physical port's connected to a switch. That switch is configured to only allow certain access based off of a username or password, for example. The supplicant provides username and password. The authenticator will grab the username and password, hash them, and forward it to the authentication server. Authentication server will say yes or no, and then respond. With the response, the authenticator will be either accessed or denied, and that permission will be passed down to the supplicant. The supplicant will take that and then either be granted the appropriate level of access. Alright, moving on. 10.3, Layer 2 security threats. There are vulnerabilities in all layers of our OSI model. However, normally the initial compromise will be done at Layer 2. Whether it be through frame spoofing or MAC address spoofing or other functionality, our Layer 2 vulnerabilities are probably some of the more common that people will have to interact with. Here we have 6 of the more common: MAC address attacks, VLAN attacks, DHCP attacks, ARP attacks, address spoofing attacks, and STP attacks. These are common types of attacks that are attacking Layer 2. And we actually have videos, or not videos, but we have slides covering each one of these. So, we have things like switch-based attacks and mitigation. So, if our switch is under attack, we can mitigate it 4 different ways. We can do port security. That prevents types of attacks including MAC address flooding attacks and DHCP starvation. DHCP snooping mitigation. That prevents starvation and spoofing DHCP attacks. We have our dynamic ARP inspection, DAI, and that prevents ARP spoofing and ARP poisoning attacks. Doesn't prevent them, but it lessens them. And then we have our IP source guard that prevents MAC address and IP address spoofing based attacks on our LAN. Well, again, these solutions aren't effective if the management protocols are not secure. So that means looking at higher level protocols, they also have to be secure. Things like SSL, TLS, FTP, VLANs, and again, implementing the appropriate management protections, things like ACLs. All of them provide additional components to layer the levels of protection. I'm going to go back one slide. So we have these 6 common types of attacks: MAC, VLAN, DHCP, ARP, address spoofing, STP attacks. Questions, concerns, please reach out. Thank you.